And good afternoon, I'm Tracy Sinclair, and we are heading over to a press conference with the governor, the attorney general, and the commissioner of Fish and Game. The governor has just taken the podium.
Oh, ready? Okay, great, thanks. I was watching Nat collect his papers. So thanks, everybody, for being here today. So we called the press conference because we have an important lawsuit we want to talk about that has great implications for the state of Alaska. The federal government has sued Alaska over fishery management on the Kuskokwim River. ANILCA only gives the feds the authority to restrict or close areas to fishing to ensure a federal rural subsistence preference. So we refute that the federal government has the authority to completely supplant and replace state management and institute their own version of management. We're going to get into some details here with the folks behind me, but what I want the people of Alaska to understand is we didn't choose this fight. The feds foisted it on us. The stakes obviously couldn't be higher because this really has to do with management of our fisheries and potentially down the road game as well. Has to do with sovereignty over our waters. But we're going to talk about the particulars of this case in a moment. What was the cause of this, the actual management disputes, and then the fact that we have to file today to meet the deadline. But nonetheless, this is a very important case for Alaska. Strikes at the heart of what, in some cases, why Alaska actually became a state. To be able to manage its own resources was a big part of that. Fisheries was a big part of that. Unfortunately, those disputes between the federal government and the state continue to today. It's our hope that through this process, and once again, we tried to work with the feds. We've sort of worked with the feds for the past 20 years or longer. But nonetheless, this is going to force the state to take action. We do that today. Case is filed, and we are confident that as it works through the courts, it'll find on behalf of the state of Alaska. But nonetheless, we'll get into some details here. And so with that, I'm going to ask the Attorney General to come up and say a few words about the particulars of the case, and then after the Attorney General, Commissioner Lang will come up and talk about what occurred on the Kuskokwim River, and then we'll open this up for questions.
Thank you, Governor. First, I want to make clear that the federal government brought this litigation. They sued us. They brought the fight to us. We didn't ask for it, but here we are. In the face of this litigation, the governor's duty, my duty, and the responsibility of Commissioner Vincent-Lang is to uphold and defend the Alaska Constitution, which we have each sworn an oath to defend, which requires the state to manage fish and game for the common use of all Alaskans and manage these resources on the sustained yield principle for the benefit of future generations of Alaskans. The federal government has no such requirement, and their patchwork management without any scientific justification on the Kuskokwim River has come to the detriment of future fish returns and to the detriment of all subsistence users, including rural subsistence users who live further up the Kuskokwim River. The bottom line is the federal government sued us to take away the right of Alaska to manage its fish and game, a right Alaska was guaranteed at statehood. If this illegal encroachment by the feds is allowed to stand on the Kuskokwim River, loss of state management on other rivers is soon to follow, like the Yukon or the Copper River. That is why it's absolutely necessary for the state to use every resource at its disposal and every argument available to defend itself in this lawsuit. Failure to prevail on this litigation will result in severely restrict the ability of most Alaskans to engage in subsistence fishing, including the majority of Alaskan natives who now live in urban areas of the state. They will be prevented from going home to practice their culture and traditions by helping their families in their subsistence lifestyles. Commissioner Vincent-Lang.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. For decades, really, the state and federal government cooperatively managed under the dual management scenario to ensure for sustainability of our fisheries and for the subsistence uses of fishermen across our state. Under that dual management, the state of Alaska was really the primary manager of our fisheries, and the federal government stepped in when it felt was necessary to restrict uses, and in so doing, restrict an opener that the state may have provided for those fishery resources. This changed in 2001 and 2022 when the federal government completely supplanted state management with federal management and began issuing openers and closures in season to ensure that the federal subsistence priority was met. This impacted the state's ability to ensure for escapement upriver of the federal waters in the Kuskokwim River. It really affected our ability to provide for subsistence users for all Alaskans and upriver users, especially those communities that are upriver of the refuge in the lower Kuskokwim River. If you can look at this map over here, you can see that the area of federal jurisdiction is pretty much in this area. In this area, last year we saw almost 10 king salmon harvested per permit in the federal refuge. Up above it, in these 8 subsistence communities that are above there, the average permit had 1.8 king salmon harvested. The harvest of king salmon in the lower river really impacted our ability to provide for the subsistence users in the upper area of under state jurisdiction. In addition, 80% of the spawning occurs in state jurisdiction waters. So when the federal government opens up harvest opportunities in the lower river, it really impacts our ability to ensure that we can meet escapement in the upper river sections. These actions really are having an impact, as I said, on both our ability to achieve escapement and sustainability over the long term, as well as our ability to ensure for subsistence uses in the upriver. Then the federal government, as you heard before, filed suit to prohibit the state from doing, in essence, any kind of in-season management of our fisheries in the lower river. The state was granted primacy of fish and game management at statehood. It's part of our statehood compact. And under ANILCA, it was clear that the state retained primacy of management and that the role of the federal government was simply to restrict uses in times of shortage. That was completely upset and forces us now into a defense of our state management authorities moving forward. Thank you. Turn it over to the governor.
Thanks, Commissioners. And so, Jeff, we'll open up for questions, and for details, I'm going to call upon the folks behind me.
Okay, thanks, Governor. We're going to go ahead and start here in the room. We'll take our first question from Nappers.
Thanks. Hi, guys. So my understanding of the management regime for the Kuskokwim is that with the federal management, there's co-management between the federal government and the Intertribal Watershed Council, and that the state doesn't have co-management agreements in the same way with tribal entities. So I'm wondering, why should or would those tribal entities support the state's position here, and is there any more openness to participating in co-management with those tribal entities from the state's perspective?
Treg, do you want to, Treg and Doug, do you want to just give a legal perspective? But I would say that what we want to do is make sure that Alaskans solve whatever issues we have internally. No discussions are off the table, but in this particular lawsuit, as we laid out, this if this is left to stand, our ability to manage our waters is absolutely in jeopardy. But folks, do you want to? Is there anyone that wants to tackle that?
So the state works with the Kuskokwim River Working Group, and that's a working group that represents users throughout the river drainage. The Intertribal Fish Commission is a much smaller group that represents basically and is advising on the refuge management. So yeah, we do take into consideration the entirety of the river, and we are working with a variety of groups, including tribal members that are part of that working group under the state management that was created by the Board of Fisheries.
Okay, for our next question, we're going to go to the reporters on Zoom right now, and to a reminder to the reporters on Zoom and here in the room, the press release that we distributed has an FAQ sheet, the map, Commissioner Vincent-Lang's sworn declaration, and attachments to the motion as well. So we'll have a lot of documents for you to review. Let's go to the first question from Margie Bauman with the Cordova Times. Margie?
Jeff?
Margie, are you there?
there.
Okay. All right, well, we'll come back to Margie if she has a question. Now let's go to Meredith Jordan with the Juneau Empire. Meredith? Okay, moving on. Fairbanks News Miner, Carter DeJong. Carter, do you have a question? Okay. All right, well, looks like, all right, we'll come back to the room. How about that? Nat, did you have a follow-up question?
I have a totally separate question that I think you probably are prepared to answer, if I had to guess, which is the issue with Cook Inlet and the need for imports and or natural gas.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt, but if somebody's speaking, we're not able to hear them.
Go ahead.
Can you talk about what you're considering and if it's likely that you will propose anything to incentivize additional Cook Inlet?
Yeah, we're getting sporadic audio and no video.
So the question was, had to do with Cook Inlet gas and the question on supply of gas. And the question as to what the state may do to incentivize gas. We're having those discussions internally with DNR. We've had those discussions with groups that are actually providers of gas that have leases in the inlet. We're continuing to have those discussions because, as we know, we want to make sure that we maintain a supply of gas in state. At the same time, we're working on a potential larger gas project on the slope. But what I want to do is assure Alaskans that we will do everything we can to ensure that we have gas to provide for heating in South Central Alaska as well as for electricity. And so you'll probably get some more information here over the next few weeks as we work through what's the best approach to make sure that we do have that gas supply.
Okay, Governor, let's go ahead and go back to the Zoom for a question. Margie Bauman with the Cordova Times. Margie, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm gonna thank you, but pass because I have lost half of the audio and have no video. So I'll wait for your news release on this. Thank you.
Okay, well, Margie, you should have the press release in your inbox right now. Let's go ahead to Meredith Jordan with the Empire. Meredith, do you have a question? All right. Okay, let's go back to the room. Jeff Landfield with the Alaska Landline.
I just have an unrelated question about the decision to replace Neil Steininger with Lacey Sanders. I'm just curious why that was made.
That's a good question, Jeff. Well, we don't, as policy, we don't talk about personnel. Okay. Thanks for being here. This, again, this is a very important case. The details are now online for folks to take a look at. We will be in continual discussions with groups throughout Alaska that have a particular stake and focus on fisheries, as well as the management issues here in the state of Alaska. But again, what we want to do is just ensure all Alaskans that we don't take this case lightly. We take it on behalf of all Alaskans and our ability, not only under our Constitution, but our ability to be able to manage our resources in the best manner that we see fit here in the state of Alaska. And we'll continue to give updates on the case and provide information for the people of Alaska. But with that, I want to thank everyone for coming here and have a great Friday. And if you get a chance, looks like there's a break in the weather, get up and see the fair. It's a fantastic place. It's been a weekend. So thank you, everybody.
And that was Governor Mike Dunleavy, along with Attorney General Treg Taylor and Commissioner of the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, Mr. Vincent-Lang. We basically heard the governor and the attorney general say that this was not a lawsuit that they wanted to file, but they said that the federal government foisted it upon them, that it brought this litigation to us. In fact, the attorney general said that they sued us. And it's all focused on resource management, in particular focused on the Kuskokwim River. The federal waters, from what we could understand, they were saying that the federal waters were doing openings and closings, and this was limiting, according to Commissioner Vincent-Lang, that the ability for us to achieve escapement higher up the river, and also for those subsistence users up the river. And both the Attorney General said that they worried that if this continued to happen in the Kuskokwim River and we didn't address it, then it would likely spread to other rivers. And they said that at statehood we were guaranteed our management of our resources, and that is what they are focusing on. So this lawsuit has been filed. They said the deadline is today. We'll have more on this story tonight on our newscast. Of course, you can always find news 24/7 on alaskasnewssource.com. Also on our free streaming channels. You can find those on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV. We'll see you tonight at 4, 5, 6, and 10 for the latest news, and we'll have the latest update on this story.